Hey folks, and welcome to the R&D Diesel channel. Today we're going to be replacing the passenger side rear parking brake cable on my 1997 Ford F350. Now this should be a very similar process for pretty much any like 1983 through 1997 Ford old body style truck, or F150s, F250s, F350s of that era. Now, I'll tell you in particular what I've got going on here is that the parking brake on this thing, it appears to be dragging, and I've traced it down to the passenger side rear brake here. And if you're not familiar with these parking brake systems, what there is that there's this cable here that runs up to this splitter, and then runs out to two separate brake cables. That one goes to the left and one goes to the right side. And the parking brake appears to be like basically dragging and sticking. And in some instances I've heard where like the brake can actually catch on fire and just builds up excessive heat, and I definitely have noticed that I'm getting excessive heat on this side. And so we're going to be replacing that here today. So I've got this Dorman model brake cable, brand new unit, only like 15 bucks. So really not that bad. Now, if you guys are curious about exactly which part I'm using the Dorman U94482. Yeah, I think you've also seen a C94482, but this worked great on my 1997 Ford F350 on the passenger side rear side. But I'll tell you a little bit more about why I think this thing's having these issues. So if you take a look, there's actually two cables here. And you'll notice that there's this kind of an outer sheath here, and then you've got the inner cable right here that actually does the pulling to engage the parking brake. And you'll notice that there's two different sheaths on this. You've got this kind of like a solid plastic one, and then you've got this kind of a spiral corrugated one. And the spiral corrugated one is actually an older style, and that's because I actually got this from a junkyard truck from the 1980s. And I know it's a very common problem where these Fords will get their parking brake cables stuck. And I suspect that what's going on here is that because it's just this kind of a corrugated kind of a spring in here, it's not actually fully sealed, and so moisture, much other junk can get in there, and it will cause corrosion and rust to build up inside, dirt and whatnot, and that can cause this thing to drag and bind and not release the parking brake all the way. Now, of course, here is the original cable in this guy that actually seems to be working fine, and that's because it does have that plastic outer sheathing, and this modern Dorman unit also has that plastic outer on it as well that I think should help with the corrosion. Now, first things first, we're going to go ahead and jack up the truck, take the tire off, and then we're going to have to pull the brake drum and everything off so we can get access to everything, because we do need to pop that off to get to the cable. Now, first things first here is to go ahead and put some blocks on both of the front tires and all the other tires that we're not going to be jacking up, and that's to help make sure that this guy doesn't roll whenever we lift up the rear end of the vehicle. And that's the thing about working on the rear tires, is that these are actually what holds the parking brake. And so when we bring it up in the air, we're not going to be able to actually use the parking brake. And so this thing would technically be free to just roll around. So that's why it's very important that you put blocks onto the front wheels to keep this thing from moving. All right, so to start out, I'm going to go ahead and raise the rear of the truck. I've got the parking brake off right now, and of course the front wheels are blocked off to make sure they don't move. I'm going to be using this Unijack here today to raise up the rear of the truck. I'm not sponsored by these guys, but I do particularly like this product. It's a combination jack and jack stand, and it alleviates a lot of the issues you normally have, where you're trying to jack up the truck and also simultaneously find a good spot to put the jack stand. Instead, this is just a combination of the two-in-one, so really nice. Alright, got the truck jacked up, so now I'm going to go ahead and take off the tire. I'm going to be using the impact wrench here today. And of course, you'd want to break the lug nuts loose if you don't have one of these, but I like them, it's faster. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pull off the brake drum. If your parking brake is stuck, you might need to wiggle it around a little bit. You might also need to use a hammer to get this thing off. I at least had to do that the other day when this thing got completely stuck. But in this case, I haven't set the parking brake since then, so it just comes right off. Now, one piece of evidence that you'll notice as to which parking brake side is sticking is, one, if you're driving around and it's like extremely hot, then that's a good indicator that that's the side that is messed up. Other thing is that this thing has a lot of brake dust all around it. Like you can see right here, like it's just a crazy amount of brake dust. And you know, this would make sense if these brakes were old, but I actually don't even have 1,000 miles in these brakes yet, and it's just got dust all over. So that's a good indicator that this is the side that's been messed up. Now, one word of caution, of course, when you're working on brakes is that, you know, a lot of this dust is not good to breathe in, so do not use compressed air to clean it off. What you're going to do is use some brake cleaner, which I've got some here. Stuff's good for getting all the grease off of these components and whatnot, but also good to keep the dust down. And of course, we'll want to make sure we don't let any of this dust get over in the environment. We want to try to keep the land clean. Now, in terms of removing this parking brake cable from the actual parking brake lever, as you can see, it's actually just like a spring holding it. Again, you have to make sure the parking brake is released for this, but you should be able to just slide it out of the joint. There you go. So I had to, it's got the circular section, so slid that up just enough to make contact with the circle. Pry it back. There we go. Got that off. There you go. So you can see it's just this little barrel that slides into that hole. And the whole thing like slides down and rotates 90 degrees to get in there. Now that guy's free. Now, to get the parking brake cable out, or sheath out of this back plate, what I'm trying to do is avoid taking apart all of the entire brake, because these drum brakes are a pain in the butt. And you can kind of see in here the two tabs that we need to compress. I've used a screwdriver here to kind of wedge it apart. You see there's two tabs, one on the top and one on the bottom. And we're going to simultaneously compress those while pulling out on the sheath, and that should allow the whole thing to pull out. Just kind of wiggling it out now, and there it is. Pulled the whole thing out, and there are those two tabs that you can see we're holding it in. I just kind of push those in and pull it out. Now, to remove the other end of it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by removing this little barrel connector. And again, this is a similar concept to what we have on the other end. Parking brake is not set on here, but it kind of just pushes through. There we go. Got that loose. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other end. I'm focusing on this bottom one. This actually has 3 tabs, it looks like, holding it in. Press that, and I'm trying to like pull back on it a little bit. When you pull back on it, that'll help to hold that tab in place in that kind of compressed state. And that should release any remaining tension we have on here, so you can pull that out. There we go. It comes right out of there. Now, underneath the truck, there is this one 13mm bolt that holds on this little bracket, and we're going to need to remove that so that we can get this other cable out. So this is just right in front of the driver's side rear axle. I don't even need to remove it all the way, and I'll fish this guy out of here. Now, right on top of the rear axle is where there's this remaining clip that it snaps into. Just pull that out. And I got the whole cable free. Now, on this new unit, I'm having a little bit of an issue where I'm trying to install it specifically on the front of the vehicle, the part that doesn't go by the parking brake, but that's closest to where the pedal is. And these little tabs are just a little bit too long, such that it's not actually wanting to clip into position. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab my Dremel tool and just take off a little bit of material not much, maybe 30 thousandths of an inch or so, just to give us the necessary clearance to make it fit. I really didn't take off much material at all, just enough that I think should make it fit. And I'll go ahead and keep going back and forth. If this doesn't fit, I'll go ahead and take off just a little bit more material until it gives us a nice snug fit. Okay, so I went ahead and reinstalled the cable with the same routing that I had before, making sure that it's secure in all of its joints and everything. And as far as connecting it over on the rear drum, it's actually pretty easy. It just pops right on in over there. So now we're to the point of actually connecting it to the parking brake lever. So this is going to be the next challenge at hand. Alright, so I went ahead and disconnected this cable from the other end. It actually makes it way easier to access, especially since this particular side has limited reach. You can't really reach it very well. Alright, so now that I have the side over by the actual drum brake itself all connected, I need to go ahead and reconnect this guy, which is being a bit of a pain in the posterior because now it actually has that good spring in there doing its job. So what I am going to do though is I'm going to go ahead and lengthen the cable here on the truck. So if your truck doesn't have this, don't be alarmed. What this is I actually added in this cable tensioner back a while back when I first got the truck because the parking brake wasn't working, and I thought that the cable had stretched. That wasn't necessarily the case. The parking brake was actually messed up. But this guy, I'm going to go ahead and loosen it up, and it'll help give me the release and tension I need. Now, to give you guys a little bit more detail about the tensioner that I have here on the parking brake cable, is actually just a 3/8 eye bolt or kind of eye tensioner that's used for cables, and I kind of just tighten it until it gives us just the proper amount of grab, good pedal feel and everything. Now, I will say, full disclosure, that this guy is not endorsed by Ford by any means. This is just my own personal way of tensioning the cable. So if you choose to go this route and add in a cable tensioner like this, you do so at your own risk. One thing I did do as an extra precaution is add in a little lock nut on here, and that's to help keep it from backing out and rotating. And again, it's very important that you have this cable working and your parking brake in general working, because it is also your emergency brake to use when going down the road. I've got the truck back on the ground, parking brake all reassembled, and man, this thing works way better than it did before. Definitely glad this fixed the problem. So if you've got a sticking brake, definitely take a look at your rear cables and see if they're like old looking, and that definitely fixed the problem on mine and makes it way better. Well, folks, that does it for today's video. Hope this helps you out, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave those down in the comment box below, and thank y'all for watching.